The purpose of this hearing is very simple. It's to show that a climate agenda must be, can be, will be additive to communities that are struggling. The President's climate agenda will create jobs and bring prosperity to places across this country, towns across this country, whether in Pennsylvania or South Carolina or West Virginia, and will not take away any opportunities. Today, we'll hear from witnesses about how to create growth for towns and cities that have lost manufacturing and fossil fuel jobs. These loss of jobs are taking place and have nothing to do with our government policy. They're due to automation in many cases and deindustrialization, which was driven by mistakes in government policy. But we need to be able to fix that by offering these communities new opportunities, new jobs that are now available with a strong investment in clean technology. Unfortunately, jobs have been in decline since the 1980s in manufacturing. Jobs have also been in decline in the coal industry. Since 1985, when there were 178,000 coal jobs, but because of automation, there are now only 42,500 jobs, with most of the decline happening actually in the 1980s and the 1990s. The pandemic has created another economic crisis. As of May, 9.3 million people were unemployed, and the unemployment rate is still too high at 5.8%. There are 7.6 million fewer jobs in the U.S. since the pandemic began. And there are over 20 million workers who are still being harmed to this day by the pandemic. That includes Black and brown communities that are experiencing unemployment the most, and rural communities that have also been particularly hard hit. You know, in my district, we have over $10 trillion of market cap in Silicon Valley of companies. And yet in towns, particularly small towns, towns less than 50,000 people, wages have stagnated in this country since 2008, and jobs have declined. That must change. The unemployment rate is 4 percentage points worse for Black Americans and 2 points higher for Latinx Americans, a situation that is unjust. Women are leaving the workforce at an alarming rate. The workforce participation rate for women was 57.4%, a level not seen since 1988. 1.79 million fewer women are in the workforce since the pandemic began, almost 2 million jobs lost. We have little time to act at the same time on the climate crisis. The U.S. and the rest of the world, as everyone knows, must achieve net zero emissions across all sectors of the economy by 2050. This is what the science tells us. This can only be accomplished with immediate mobilization. We must invest in renewable energy, sustainable agriculture, zero-emission transportation, clean industry, and efficient and electrified buildings. These are investments in jobs, and those communities that are struggling must be prioritized. Those communities that are most reliant on the fossil fuel industry must be prioritized. They must be told and promised that we're going to bring new jobs first, that the government policy is going to bring jobs to their communities, not take any jobs away. We can solve the climate and employment crisis at the same time. According to a study on the Thrive Agenda, an investment of $1 trillion per year in a clean economy will create 15.5 million jobs, many of those jobs precisely in the communities that have been left behind, jobs in the heartland of our country, jobs in Black and brown communities. These investments would also put the country on track to stay below the 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming. They would revitalize forgotten communities that have lost manufacturing and fossil fuel jobs. They must be, in many cases, union jobs. Strong labor and equity standards will ensure that these are good jobs. We can't tell a worker who was making $30 an hour and had benefits that suddenly they're going to be be in a job that isn't as good. That's unfair. These jobs must be as good as the jobs that communities have lost, if not better. The President's American Jobs Plan is a good start to this crisis, as is the President's infrastructure plan. Climate is infrastructure because climate is about creating new jobs and building the modern infrastructure in communities that are hurting. The Thrive Act, which I have co-sponsored, will also provide family-sustaining union jobs for 15 million Americans, as will the Water Act, which I am a proud co-lead on. These bills are the kind of solutions that Congress should implement to address the historic deindustrialization and discrimination that we face as a nation. I hope that we will have a conversation, and I look forward to hearing from our experts on what we can do to create these new jobs for the 21st century in left-behind communities.